What's up, guys? You are watching Fight Feed, and I am going to be giving you my recap of the UFC Fight Night Emmett vs. Murphy card that just happened. I will be giving you my take on how I feel about each fight that happened on the card, and also where I feel I maybe made some bad decisions in some of my picks. So starting off this video, looking at this card, unfortunately, there were a couple matchups that fell apart that I honestly had no idea about. For instance, Davy Grant, our boy from England, was not able to fight. Was very excited for that, and he obviously wasn't able to fight. I saw that he made weight, but apparently his opponent didn't even show up to the weigh-ins due to a medical issue. Hopefully everything works out for him. But I feel like the UFC might actually part ways with that guy because apparently this is the 6th time it's happened in his career. Only one of those occurrences was not his fault, apparently, based on something that I read online. That said, another fight on the card that fell apart was the Kennedy Njoku versus Martin Buday. So a couple fights fell apart, and it's some of the ones that I was looking forward to. But regardless, we can go ahead and jump into the start of the card. Vanessa Demopoulos versus Talit Alencar. This was an absolute domination from Alencar. Demopoulos didn't even stand a chance. I am pretty upset with that pick. Unfortunately, you get hindsight's 20/20, of course. Demopoulos just got schooled everywhere. I think Alencar landed better shots in the feet, ultimately then getting it to the ground and just controlling and owning the fight from start to finish. Not necessarily a barn burner, as Dana would say, but definitely Alencar showed a very high level of skill, and I just think Demopoulos was completely outmatched in this one. Next fight on the card, we got Martin Buday versus Uran Salty Balls. I think his last name is actually Sati Baldiev. I call him Salty Balls because it's just easier for me. Salty Balls looked great. I didn't even know anything about this guy going into this fight. Obviously, this fight fell apart, I think, on Thursday last week. I'm not sure what happened with Njoku, but I was hearing on the broadcast that Salty Balls got the call Thursday and he took it. He just fought last week, I think, or not last week, but last month in LFA, and somehow was able to go out there and actually made a great showing of himself. I don't know if you guys watched this live, you would have heard Dominic Cruz talk the entire fight about the weight discrepancy or weight difference between Martin Buday and Salty Balls. I think it was definitely a big weight discrepancy, obviously. I do think that Dominic Cruz had a right to talk about it a bit, but he was talking about it from start to finish. And even Michael Bisping was throwing some lobs up there for him to like get the hint that like, hey dude, you continue to mention this, maybe just like let it go. And Cruz just kept on it. And, it is kind of funny because like when Dominic Cruz and Bisping are on the same card together, sometimes it almost seems like they're like, there could be tension there, or like these two might end up scrapping. Obviously, I think Dominic Cruz would get schooled just because of the size difference, but it was very interesting, and I think that perhaps it's even just some banter back and forth, which is kind of fun. This fight was actually a really good fight. I enjoyed watching it. Salty Balls made a great showing. He was only 222 pounds to that of Martin Buday, who was 285 pounds. Now, in terms of the actual weight for the official weigh-ins, Martin Buday did make heavyweight. The dude cuts weight for heavyweight, which is nuts. That said, they did say that his actual fight weight, like after weigh-ins and everything, and then after rehydrating, was 285 pounds. And I would think that Salty Balls, being that he fights at light heavyweight, he was weighing in at 222 for heavyweight. I don't think that he even probably was cutting anything. So the odds of him really gaining much weight, thereafter are very slim. I'm sure he went in kind of exactly as he is now. So definitely about a 60 pound, maybe we'll call it 50 pound plus weight discrepancy there. But Salty Balls looked great on the feet. He was catching Buday, definitely the faster fighter in that fight, and he caught Buday with quite a few shots. But I think the big difference in this is that weight and that size discrepancy. Salty Balls would land 3 or 4 to Buday's 1, and Buday's would definitely have some more sting on it. But I think in terms of actual damage, Buday actually was able to bloody Salty Balls up a bit. That said, Salty Balls did land a pretty big shot on Martin Buday in the, I think it was the 3rd round, and wobbled him badly. It might have been the 2nd round, but he did stumble him, but wasn't able to capitalize on it. And unfortunately, after he hurt Buday, I was kind of screaming. I was screaming, where's the knee? Where's the knee? And I scared my dog, and that she actually hurt herself. She like jumped off the bed. But he had him in in a clinch, and he had an open knee right there. Like Budai's head was right down where Salty Balls could throw a salty knee right up the middle and catch him. But ultimately, that's not what happened. Martin Budai did a lot of pushing against the cage and controlling and just really outsizing Salty Balls. But I think that for Salty Balls to come in on short notice like that, it was a great showing, and I'm excited to see what he does next. I hope that the UFC gives him another shot, obviously at the weight division that he normally fights at. So just as I'm going through this, I can give you guys this repack of what I picked. Obviously, I picked Demopoulos for the first one, so I'm 0-1. This fight didn't actually happen between Budai and Nchokwi, so because of that, I don't count it because obviously I wasn't making a pick on a fight that I wasn't aware of. So the next fight on the card, we've got Victor Henry versus Pedro Falco. This was a really good fight, and actually I'm happy about my decision that I made with Victor Henry. Victor Henry was classic Victor Henry. He went out there and made it a scrappy fight, was able to actually hurt Falco in the first round pretty badly, dropping him. After that, I think Henry ultimately was able to control the fight. However, Falco made it scrappy even in the different ground exchanges they had, but also on the feet, continuing to throw and landing shots of his own on Victor Henry. But ultimately, I think Victor Henry just was able to utilize the skills that he has and also the grit that he has to get this unanimous decision. He definitely was, setting the tone for the fight, setting the pace for the fight. But it was actually pretty scary when they would get into some of those scrambles on the ground because Falco was close to getting Henry in a couple compromised positions. But Victor Henry really showed, although he's getting up there in age in this weight class, he showed his ability to scramble and out-scramble that of Falco. Also hurt him in the legs a little bit with some leg kicks. Ultimately, I would say it was just a great performance from Victor Henry. Definitely would have liked to see him get a finish. I know he went for it though, and it's a tough outing when you're going against a guy like Falco, who's also super experienced, especially on the ground. Now, in that fight though, Victor Henry and Falco, and one thing that was kind of annoying is they were playing like Falco was making Henry play like hacky sack with the back of his legs in a couple exchanges. He would just lay on his back and like try to have Henry enter his guard, just laying there. Like at one point, I think he had his arms behind his back like this, just chilling. And Henry was like, I'm going to play hacky sack with this dude. So he's just kicking the back of his legs. Not necessarily the greatest look for Falco, but I think that ultimately he stayed in the fight as much as he could. Henry was just outclassed him in this one. With that, I was able to finally get my first win on this card, so I was 1-1 at this point. Next fight on the card, we got Loma Lookboonmee versus Istela Nunes. Okay, this fight was a good fight. I thought some of the notes that I had, Lookboonmee's kicks are like a bat hitting a tree. Like, just imagine like a Louisville Slugger hitting like that real dry oak bark on a tree. Like, it sounds vicious, and it sounded like very, very damaging, especially in the first like opening sequences of round 1 and round 2. But I will say Istela Nunes was able to also capitalize, landing some shots of her own. Now, what was the biggest factor in this fight is I think that Lookboonmee had a way better chance on the feet with her Muay Thai background and landing those heady kicks. And Istela Nunes was, playing that game with her instead of trying to bring her boxing in, which is actually something Dominic Cruz called out. Istela Nunes, I think, did have better hands, especially in some of the exchanges throughout the fight, but she would never just stick to the hand. She would try to go kick for kick with a Muay Thai expert in Lookboonmee, and it just didn't go her way. Now, I think that it was pretty delusional for Nunes at the end to go, "What? What?" She lost the fight, like, pretty convincingly, in my opinion. It wasn't even close. So for her to be, like, surprised and, like, do the put the arms up at the end, like, I know every fighter does that, but it was pretty delusional. But guess what? As we know, having a bit of delusion sometimes plays in your favor as a fighter. This fight puts me up 2-1 on my picks. The next fight on the card was Rhys McKee versus Daniel Frunza. And I'm so happy I picked Rhys McKee. I was a bit worried, honestly, after seeing some of the highlights from Daniel Frunza. He definitely has landed some big shots on other fights that he's been in and hurt or knocked out other opponents. But Rhys McKee, Skeletor, went out there and just put it on him. And it was bad. I mean, he dropped him bad in one of the first sequences they had for strikes. And he ends up getting 4 knockdowns in the first round, leaving Frunza with a big shiner. Like his eye was basically closed on that side. And then he had the Alistair Overeem split lip that the doctor ends up stopping the fight due to that. And I think that this is actually a great thing because I think, I don't know Daniel Frunza that well, but Reese McKee did say that, he's a very nice guy, but he did say before the fight that Reese McKee doesn't punch hard. And I think he learned very quickly that is not the case. So I'm always a big fan of humble pie being served. And it seems like that was a very deserving humble pie from Reese McKee. So at that point, that makes me 3-1 on the card. So far doing pretty good on my picks. Perfect segue, though, into the next fight because it all gets shaken up here. I had Diana Belbita versus Dion Barbosa. I chose Belbita, and it was a bad decision. I think at first, Belbita looked good on the feet. She was showing off her acumen in being a very technical striker. Was able to I think she was switching stances a bit, throwing out some teep kicks, just throwing different combinations, landing an overhand at times. But ultimately, like the first thing that I noticed was not only was Barbosa, did she look just more intimidating from a physical standpoint, like her presence. Barbosa just looked like she was ahead or a step ahead of Belbita the entire time, and then ultimately was able to get her down on the ground and, latch up that submission and get a $50K bonus. One thing I need to start looking into before I choose these picks on fight cards is if a fighter is actually constantly utilizing the likes of the UFC Apex, because right when I heard the commentators say that Barbosa had moved to Vegas full time and she's a constant presence in the Apex, I feel like when fighters, it's not always the case, but when fighters take their job seriously, in this case, they use that Apex. They have access to all the different tools the Apex provides. They have the meals, they have the cryotherapy, they have the ice baths, they have the physical therapy, they have the trainers, the strength and conditioning. Like they have everything at their disposal where even if you go, I think if you go to a very high level gym, having the Apex at your fingertips as a fighter and being able to train there every day, I think is a huge plus. And if I would have known that, I might have made a different decision here. But ultimately, I went with Belbita just based off of her experience, and I thought that she'd be able to, land some big shots. But, it is what it is. Barbosa won, and it was a great win for her. That puts me to 3-2 on the card. And that was actually the last fight of the prelims, so we'll get down to the main card now. First fight on the main card, we had Torres Finney, the brick shithouse, versus Robert Valentin. And I don't mean brick shithouse in a negative way. The dude is so fucking short and stout. He's like a goddamn fire hydrant. I will say, kind of looking at this fight, I had moments of not trusting my pick even before they got in the octagon. Because Valentin is definitely a gamer. He's a guy that wants to hurt people on the feet. He definitely has that aura to him, where if he's in a fight, he's going to try to hurt you or put your lights out. But the reason I chose Finney in this case was just based off of the last performance Valentin had. I just felt like once he was put to the ground by Ryan Loder, he couldn't do anything. And that's kind of exactly what happened in this fight. Although Torres Finney is not, he's not winning anyone over, especially Dana White, who made him fight on the Contender Series 3 times. That performance, just, going for takedowns the whole time and not really doing anything, I mean, it's definitely impressive to see how he's able to pick up these guys who are a lot larger than him and put them to the ground, but he's not doing much on the feet and then not doing much on the ground. It's just you want to see him do a bit more, but Torres Finney still won this fight and he brought the fight to the place where he had the advantage, which is what I think most people were expecting of him. Now, I'll say Torres Finney, he's definitely just got to do more in his next fights, because I think that if he's continuing to do this on a consistent basis, he could be, in the same boat as everyone's favorite fighter, Colby Covington, who almost got released for being a boring fighter. So I think that Torres Finney's just got to, he's got to just keep leveling up, adding some more stuff to his game. But ultimately, I'm happy to see him win. I know he's been really trying hard. He did 3 fights in Contender Series, so you got to give him some props there. Also, the judge that scored this fight for Valentin, now I want to say, like, as a fan of the sport, I am sometimes on that same page of really focusing on the damage, because damage is what matters. But to say that Valentin won every round of that fight, that judge should never judge again. I mean, that is fucking ridiculous. So I'm just going to put that out there. I can't even believe a judge would sit there and say that Valentin won every round of that fight, especially when Valentin didn't do jack shit in round 1. Like, if you're giving Valentin the win of round 1 for laying on his back and doing fuck all, I don't know what sport you're watching, but you should not be judging a MMA fight, because that's just absolutely ridiculous. But hey, it's right on point with what we've seen previously, right? The judging being fucking ass sometimes. Next fight on the card, Ode Osborne versus Louis Garuli. Now, before I jump into this, just a quick check for myself. I'm 4-2 at this point on the card because I chose Finney. Ode Osborne goes out there and he does exactly what I thought he'd be able to do, and that is use his experience in the octagon to ultimately get the win. And I actually think I said that he could get the finish on the feet because he has very good striking. And that's exactly what happened. Going into round 2, he was shucking off the takedowns. He did have success on the feet in round 1, landing some good shots on Garuli. And then but Garuli was able to get him down, get some control in round 1. Ode gets into round 2 and stays on the feet the whole time. Garuli's not able to get him down and ultimately finds that kill shot. And when he landed that kill shot, I was screaming, like, what the fuck are you doing? Because he literally lands this kill shot and he doesn't go in for the kill. And it was really cool to hear what he said after the fight, because he said in the fight against Lazy Boy, he knocked him down and basically KO'd him. But then when he went and threw the follow-up shots on the ground, it woke him back up. So he was like trying to make sure that Garuli was like dead to rights, KO'd before he did anything. When he saw him move, he went in and threw the follow-up shots, ultimately making the ref step in. But yeah, I think that a lot of people are choosing Garuli. I think every other creator chose Garuli, but I didn't, because I've seen Ode Osborne have these moments where he can land very heavy shots on the feet and really hurt his opponents. And I thought that he'd be able to do that in this fight too. So ultimately very happy with that pick. That put me at 5-2. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough for me to be ahead of the other creators, but I'll get into that in my other video that I'll be making. So great win for Ode. Also got a 50K bonus. Next fight on the card, we got Brad Tavares versus Gerald Meerschaert. This fight was a great fight, actually. Meerschaert is like, dude, I fucking love Meerschaert. I wanted to pick Meerschaert, but I just felt that Tavares would just have those stinging punches on the feet that would kind of set him on the back foot. And that's kind of exactly what happened. There was a lot of success, though, for Meerschaert as the fight went on. And Meerschaert proved that he is a guy who has 55 professional MMA fights under his belt. First round, he's getting tagged, getting stung, kind of trying to figure out his game, trying to latch up a takedown, getting Tavares against a cage, making it a bit scrappy. But ultimately, Tavares lands the better shots, and he clearly wins round 1. But round 2 and 3 were a lot closer, except for Meerschaert, getting dropped at one point. He really made it scrappy. He started to kind of catch on to Tavares' right hand, slipping it and landing some shots of his own. Meerschaert is he is the definition of a very crafty veteran, and he goes out there, and if you don't put him out, he finds ways to get you to play into his game and also win fights. I mean, like I said in my picks video, he was getting his ass beat by Edmund Shabazian, but he stayed in that fight and was able to get Shabazian to play his game, and then he got the win. So you're never like fully in, unless you KO Meerschaert like Khamzat Chimaev did in the first shot. You're never fully safe with this guy. Like if he makes it scrappy like he usually does, he could find a submission. He can land shots on the feet. He's got a very awkward style that I think is hard for fighters to figure out, and it's successful for him. Ultimately, I feel like Meerschaert still got a lot of gas in the tank, and I would love to see him to continue fighting. Great to see Tavares get this win. And also, I think I heard that he tied the record for most middleweight wins in UFC history. So that's another feather in his cap. It'll be interesting to see where these guys go next. That puts me at 6-2 on this card. So I did really good so far with these picks. Next fight on the card, we got Cortavious Romeus versus Lee Chang-ho. Now, this fight I chose Lee Chang-ho. I just felt that Lee Chang-ho would have the better game all around on the striking and on the ground. He calls himself Korean Khabib. I think he's got a little bit more improved there, but he did a great job in this fight. It was very scrappy at the start of the fight. The two of them were just swanging and banging against the cage. Cortavious landed a couple really good shots, and I was worried that he might send Chang-ho packing, but Chang-ho was able to get him down to the ground and ultimately get the back, control him. I did like to see, though, from Cortavious, just the grit and will to want to continue in this fight and try to do whatever he can to get out of harm's way and also potentially get one up on Lee Chang-ho. I think Cortavious is now 0-2 in the UFC. I would like to see him get another chance with the UFC. I don't want to see the UFC do the shit they do where they just drop a fighter, because I think that Cortavious, although he was not technically good enough to beat Lee Chang-ho, the guy has fucking heart, and you have to respect it. And to see him fight his way, just strength his way out of certain positions, even not having the technique, but still stay in this fight and do whatever he can, I just respect that as a fan. And I want to see him get some more chances, because I think that he always brings a fun fight. But ultimately, Lee Chang-ho was the better man tonight. I was able to finish it out in round 2 with some ground and pound. He cut Cortavious up and then was just able to slash him and beat him on the ground. And he also got himself a bonus, so good for him. I think that makes me 7-2 at this point on the card. And just like that, all my success goes out down the drain, because the next fight, Pat Sabatini versus Brito. Pat Sabatini beat the dog shit out of Joe Anderson Brito. It was not even a close fight in any regard. And Pat Sabatini's got all my respect. I mean, that was a picturesque performance from him. This is another thing. Looking into fights and understanding like who people are training with. I knew Pat Sabatini trained with, I think he trained with Ray Longo and Matt Serra, but I also learned that he does a lot of close training with Sean Brady, and that performance proved it. He's a fellow Philly guy, and Pat just looked great. And Brito, was doing his best to try to land shots. I don't understand why Brito was throwing kicks, especially that first body kick he threw 30 seconds into the fight. I feel like that was a layup for Sabatini to get a takedown. So I'm not really sure what Brito's mindset was there, but ultimately Sabatini controlled this guy for 13 minutes out of the 15 minutes of the fight on the ground, landed heavy shots at the end of the fight, was trying to get him in an arm triangle for pretty much the whole fight. Brito showed great defense on the ground. And obviously he had glimpses of showing his power, but it just wasn't enough to close out the show. I mean, I think that seeing how skilled Sabatini is on the ground, that just levels up the win that Diego Lopez has over him. So I think that when you look at it that way, Sabatini could be a force to be reckoned with as he continues on in this featherweight division. Next fight on the card. By the way, that brings me to 7-3 on the card. Next fight on the card, Josh Emmett versus Lerone Murphy. This was, making this pick, I chose Josh Emmett, and it was probably the one pick that I felt the most hesitant about, because Emmett's age, obviously, and Lerone Murphy, despite him having a lot of decision wins, and not only just decision wins, but split decision wins, I felt like I had a feeling that he had that potential to get caught. And that's also based off of, previous fights he's had, like the Barboza fight. He was getting caught in certain exchanges where my mindset was, if Emmett catches him with that type of shot, it's lights out. But Murphy looked fantastic tonight. He looked great. The way he was able to move on his feet, the way he was able to not only evade the power of Emmett, but also have his own weapons to keep Emmett guessing. And I did say in my picks video, the way that Murphy wins that fight is kind of using that entire tool bag he has, throwing feints out there and being kind of like a snake charmer to that of Josh Emmett. And I think Josh Emmett looked great, especially in some of the grappling. Like Josh Emmett actually, and I think it was round 2, it wasn't even a suplex. He just fucking threw Murphy over his back, and Murphy legit like catapulted into the canvas. It was kind of sick. But what I'll say though is Emmett's right hand is a very powerful weapon for him, as we all know. But in this fight, and I think that I should have seen this beforehand, he just looks one-dimensional. He's kind of always stuck in the orthodox stance, always looking for that overhand right or a hard right hand, not really mixing in much of a jab or any other combinations. And I feel like in some moments of this fight, he was caught kind of taking pictures, and Lerone was just styling on him with his footwork. Josh did have some really good grappling exchanges, but ultimately, I feel like when I was watching the fight, I saw on X people were saying like 2-2 going into the 5th round. I did not have it 2-2. I wanted Emmett to win so bad, guys, but it was not even that. It was not close. I think Lerone had this fight in the bag. He was just able to be the more elusive fighter, land some of the bigger shots. He opened up in the first elbow he landed of the fight. But Emmett's a dog, and he's always out there, and he always has that one-hit quitta. But in this fight, he just wasn't able to find that kill shot on Murphy. And ultimately, that's what we ended up seeing, is that Murphy is a very skilled fighter, has the footwork and all of the other tools in his bag to get the win. And I really like to see how he was throwing that side kick to the leg. It was definitely a problem for Josh Emmett. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if Josh Emmett has like an injury coming out of that fight from those side kicks to the leg. So very good performance from Lerone Murphy. I'll be excited to see where he goes next in the featherweight division, because now he's going to be climbing up the rankings even more so. And it'll be interesting to see who he gets paired up with next. I actually wouldn't mind seeing him get paired up with Movsar Evloev. I know that we have the featherweight championship happening next Saturday, and that Movsar is really kind of next in line for the title. But it would be cool to see Movsar versus Lerone Murphy, to see if Lerone can figure out that puzzle of Movsar, who has that very, very heavy grappling and very successful grappling. So ultimately, I think that this fight card actually was pretty entertaining. Definitely not going to be as entertaining as next weekend's, but definitely a great fight night card for the Apex. I enjoyed it myself. Let me know what you guys think of this fight card. Make sure you comment below any of the things that you saw in this fight or in these fights that you feel I didn't call out. Yeah, I think the only other thing I would mention, Michael Bisping seemed to be pretty frustrated with Chris Tognoni. There's a couple of times when Tognoni was the ref tonight where I could literally hear Bisping like heavy breathing, like just getting annoyed. I mean, I do think that he has some right to feel that way, especially in some of the moments that happened. But I do think that Tognoni definitely tries his best to stay out of the fight as much as possible, which you have to appreciate. But I think that there's some moments where it's like, dude, you got to be controlling the octagon, not the other people. Yeah, ultimately, I thought it was a good fight card. Let me know what you guys think. Comment below. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe if you want to see more MMA content.